thank you. And we are now going to move into this last discussion section about law and technology. And it's supposed to be an informal chat, but on the other hand, to sort of structure it a little bit, Sabine Walsh, Professor Harry Reich, and Dr. Emma Roberts have kindly agreed that they will chip in to answer a few questions, just to sort of seed our discussion. So perhaps I could start with Sabine. Who's you're the founder, co-founder, and of the Mediator Academy. And yesterday you spoke to us, Sabine, about the use of video technology to train people in mediation skills. And I just wondered, whether you could go beyond that use of video technology to use video technology in education more generally. And I know you said that you've had some involvement in a project with the Law Society of Ireland.
Now, there, I'm unmuted. Yes, good morning, afternoon, lunchtime, evening, whatever it is over there and where everybody else is. Yeah, so I was very interested in what Professor Susskind was saying earlier on, actually, in terms of, 21st century skills and the need for students to learn 21st century skills, and that technology will assist in this, and simulations and that kind of thing. So yes, I mean, even within what we do, our remit, despite the name, extends beyond mediation to communication skills, which I think the previous speaker was talking about, and other 21st century skills. And we've had an interesting collaboration with the Law Society over the last couple of years, which was sort of boosted this year, obviously, when their professional practice course, which is their solicitor's training course, went online overnight. And they phoned us up and said, help. we need, we need some assistance here in getting some really good quality online learning to the students. So one of their big issues was on that particular course, there are 448 students. So doing synchronous video sessions and video lectures was complex, getting everybody there at the one time. And that sort of thing. And also they were very much confined to this sort of medium, a one directional, or maybe with a little bit of dialogue. But when there's 448 participants, dialogue is a little bit difficult, So I suppose what we were able to do was, offer them some of our modules, which was in the area of mediation and ADR, which I don't know how much you know about Ireland, but we have a newish Mediation Act here, which is really put mediation front and center of legal practice. And what the students liked about it, I mean, so these students will be all in their kind of mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and they've all been raised on YouTube. I might still get out the instruction booklet for my washing machine when it breaks, but these people, they go to video. Video is their primary mechanism for gaining that kind of knowledge. So they engaged, they loved the content, they loved the videos, both the simulation and the expert interview teaching videos. And what they also, the feedback we overwhelmingly got was that, because a lot of these people are, they're all locked down in various bits of Ireland and wherever else they might be. And just the fact that they were able to engage with their learning when it suited them. And that, of course, is the big advantage of particularly of pre-recorded video and asynchronous video, is that the kids could, a lot of them are obviously night owls. They were on the platform at 3 a.m. and 2 a.m. and that, but doing the learning in chunks when it suited them, when they were in the right headspace, And the other thing that they really loved about it, and what I think is so important for education, and I was really enjoyed what I just have to check back his name, Jeremy Dane, was saying about communication skills. I think a lot of the time when you're in law school, the real world of practice is so far away. Certainly when I was in law school, the thought that I might ever do any of these things in reality was miles away. And there was a huge learning curve when I went into the office first. And even in, how to talk to a client in a consultation, how to manage email communication, what you do when a fellow solicitor phones you up and reads you the riot act, because you haven't sent the right documentation over, all that sort of stuff. So what the students really liked was, the way we kind of present the content is in an interview conversational style with practitioners. And it's very much around, here's the theory, this is the legal principle. The legal principle is, as a solicitor, you must advise your client to consider mediation. But how do you do that in practice? How does that conversation go? Well, this is what I do. You're the client. So that sort of modeling, that simulation, and bringing to life the skills, particularly of taking legal principles and putting them into practice. So that's what I think one of the affordances of video that just goes beyond anything you can do in a more passive way. Don't know if that answers the question. Oh,
I'm muted. It does. And so somebody yesterday used this phrase of breaking the bubble, and that's what you're saying really, that imaginative use of video could allow us to break down that kind of divide between the university and the workplace.
Yes. Yes, and it doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be by video, or you don't have to go out and hire a camera crew to tape, to videotape all your lectures. There's organizations like ourselves that offer that, but it can be little things like, particularly as remote learning is going to continue for the foreseeable future, things like, as a lecturer, giving 5-minute video feedback on somebody's assessment, rather than the scribbled notes on your script, or, a few boxes ticked in a rubric, so that personal feedback. And actually, for me, it's a hell of a lot easier for me to make a 2-minute video talking about the strengths and weaknesses of somebody's paper than it is to write it out by hand and then email it to the office. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of different ways in which you can use it, and video is so humanizing. Even I'm sitting in Ireland. I don't know where you are. I think you're in Hong Kong. There's people in India. There, Suskind is there in Hampstead or Hampshire, wherever he is. It's very personal, and students value that enormously. They value their tutors and teachers as human beings and experienced people.
Well, I went to the Association of Law Teachers conference a couple of years ago. One of the papers was on that. Somebody had done exactly that. So it was audio feedback rather than video, but he was making the point. It had much more impact.
That's such a shame. Before you finish, we were due to present at that conference this year, but of course that bit the dust as well at the last minute. So I had my flights booked and everything. But anyway, next year.
I hope so. And then I'd like to turn now to Professor Ari Reich at the Bar-Ilan University. And you were really talking about the challenge of moving exams online. We all feel that pain because we've all been through it. Maybe you could just tell us about the challenges and the lessons that you've learned. I know you've just given the presentation, but not everybody was.
Okay. What I explained is, we were basically facing this challenge of how to give the exams online when everybody was locked up in their homes. And so there are technological problems and there are issues of integrity. So the technological problems were relatively easy to solve because we could use Moodle to give exams. Now you need to practice it, you need to learn it. Actually, I put in hours and hours to learn the system so that I could master it. What I suggested also is to also drill the students. So I gave them a drill exam before the actual exam, so that they would understand how it works and how to submit their answers. And also it really reduced their anxiety, because there was a lot of anxiety before this exam, how it's going to be and how they're going to submit, and what if the system falls, and what if the computer, what if the electricity goes down in the middle, etc., etc. So this kind of calmed them down, and I was also all the time in touch with them. They could send me emails. I could solve problems as they came along. So that went well. Now the more complicated question is, how do you give an exam so that they don't copy from each other, or they don't use all kinds of other cheating that is not allowed. So I mentioned that there actually are out there technologies which are called remote proctoring, remote exam proctoring, something like that. We don't have access to them, but apparently there are softwares like that, where actually the student downloads an application on the computer, and the computer gets completely controlled by the examiner. It can also lock all of the other features of the computer, such as the web and communications, etc., so that the only thing that the student can do is to write the exam, and the camera will be on and basically following him or her during the exam. You can even have a person sitting in the university watching him and commenting, if he's moving or doing things that look suspicious. But what do you do if you don't have such a system, which we didn't have? So the general idea that I came up with is that you need to design an exam that is not uniform. In other words, that does not require a uniform answer. Because if all the students have to write the same answer, then they can cooperate between themselves and coming up with these answers. So what I did was, I usually use case or scenarios for students to analyze, and I make up a story basically, which involves tort in my case, and they have to analyze it. Who is the tortfeasor? Who are the claimants? What are the different torts involved? They have to calculate damages and all kinds of things like that. So what I did in this case, instead of me making up the story, I told them to make up the story. And basically, I gave them instructions on what the story had to be made up of. So they had to kill the victim, which I always do, and they had to be at least 3 or 4 different torts in the story. There had to be issue of contributory negligence. There had to be issue of uncertainty and causality. And this way, every student came up with a different story, and consequently, of course, he had to analyze a different story. So there could be no cooperation here. And then I had another, I think, kind of original idea, because when you come to calculate damages, you need to know what the age of the victim was when he was killed. It changes the calculation. Also, if he is minor or if he's adult, etc. If he had children, he was married, not married, etc. So what I did was I told them that the age of the victim is the 5 multiplied by the last digit of their ID number. And if the last digit was 0, so relate to the 0 as though it was 10. So this way, basically, the students came up with ages between 5 and 50 of the victim. So almost everyone had a different age, and then they had to decide themselves. I told them if he's over 25, he was married, or he or she was married, and you decide yourself how many children he had, and that also changes the calculation. So I think this kind of ideas can help you make exams different and special. And for the second question, I asked them to choose any judgment that we had studied during the course, and to analyze it according to the main theories of tort law that I had taught them during the course. Another professor that I interviewed told them ahead of time that they're going to have to use research on a database during the exam. So what he did was he told them to find a judgment that is not by the Supreme Court and that deals with this and this issue, something that he had taught. And so everyone had to basically go during the exam, go into the database, look for this judgment, and then he asked them all kinds of general questions about the judgment and which approach does it take to this specific legal question out of the various approaches that had been taught in class, and things like that. So again, everyone had a different judgment. First of all, they had to use their skills to find the judgment. Then everyone had a different judgment, and as a result, the answers were completely different. Now, admittedly, that demands more when you check the exam. We often use TAs to check the exams, and they have an easy life in the sense that they just have the standard question, the standard answers, and they check the exams of the students in comparison to the standard solution. Here, there's no standard solution. So they need to be knowledgeable and know the system, and it's really best if you do it yourself. But we have an appeal procedure. So if a student thinks that the TA wasn't fair with him in checking the exam, he can appeal to me, and this way I got to check most of the exams and make sure that they get the proper mark.
So it's really having something unique instead of having proctoring or some kind of technological solution. The answer was to have assessment tasks that you couldn't cooperate with other students on. It was unique to that student.
Exactly.
Emma, just to turn to you now. So I don't know if you were there for Richard Susskind's talk, but one aspect of that talk was he was saying we've got to prepare people, lawyers, for 21st century practice. And in fact, Steve Gallagher said, well, does that mean we've all got to learn to code? And the answer came back, no, it doesn't mean that. But it means that you've got to know enough about the coder's job, that's what I understood him to say, that you can have an intelligent conversation with them. So what do you think about how do we prepare students to work in this digital workplace?
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I think generally speaking, we haven't been doing too great a job at this because we explored in the panel that I chaired yesterday on the back of hearing some of the things that have been done in all manner of other jurisdictions, and I spoke about my own situation in Chester in the UK. I think the world of legal practice and the world in general has already emerged into this digitalization, and perhaps the legal education sector has been somewhat slow in picking up on this, so that it's a blessing that the whole lockdown has actually got us all talking about this, because there seems to me to be a lot being done, but that it's being done in pockets. I mean, I know that there are lots of international global movements going in this way, such as the legal hackers movement, which brings technologists and lawyers together to discuss the impact of law upon technology and technology upon the law. But I think in terms of curriculum design, there's a whole lot that we could be doing at universities and alternative higher education institutions to prepare our students by embedding digital literacy onto our curriculum. And my feeling on the issue of coding and so on, which just seems a world away from us and not something that naturally speaks to our logic and rationale or legal reasoning as lawyers or legal minds. The answer for me there would be much the same, in that no, it doesn't mean that we need to become technologists, but we need to become technologically aware lawyers. And I think that's a critical distinction, because to introduce into this arena of discussion the prospect that we all have to get on board with the intrinsic works of coding will be too frightening for words. And I think even the concept of introducing onto the curriculum digital literacy is going to be, for some colleagues, too frightening for words. And one of the things that I focused on in my paper, and I think a message that I would implore on the entire legal education network is, yes, it's going to be daunting going into teaching for the forthcoming term if we haven't already given thought to how we're going to embed digitalization onto our curriculum. But the important thing is that we kind of pull together, because yes, there are brilliant opportunities, such as the amazing snippet given there of how a taught exam can be made so creative. But you know, we are lawyers at the end of the day. We are lawyers first, and we are educators second. We impart our knowledge of the law upon our students, and we have for a long time embraced creativity in the way that we are delivering that to our students. But we are now being told that we need to embrace an entirely different world. So the important thing is that yes, we as far as possible are creative, but then we also, you know, acknowledge other people's creativity. And as educators, we're of course aware of issues of academic integrity and falling foul of plagiarism. But that doesn't mean that we can't be curators of technological materials that are already out there, because that in itself will feed our creativity. So I was speaking yesterday about this law tech and legal hackers idea on the one hand, which is, you know, a global movement of legal academic discussion, but there's also the emerging world of legal design. And I, for one, I'm really inspired by a strong group of legal education enthusiasts that, you know, a network that I'm able to tap into within UK universities. And one of the people involved there is Emily Albon, who has put together some brilliant e-learning resources. And I can't speak highly enough of this woman, who's just, you know, she personifies thinking ahead. And, you know, there are so many others who are paving the way in terms of creating these materials, which means that we can use them. And I think there's a danger, I don't know globally, but I think there's a danger in the UK mentality in any case. Perhaps it's the same in Ireland, Sabine, where we view ourselves to be in competition. So as universities, there is this thought in the ether, because when we go on to committees at university level and so on, we're forever faced with league tables. But the reality is that as legal education practitioners, we are one group, we are a network. So I think there's an importance in sharing. So one of the things that I said in my paper, you'll remember, Michael, was in relation to the community, the legal community, the learning community. And this is what that spurred on the intervention that I had created with my students, was to create them in a learning community. And I was speaking about the challenges of replicating that community online for the forthcoming term. And I think, you know, we've got to address the fact that we are a community of legal educators, and that through that we can work through what is quite a scary prospect of having to overhaul our curriculum to embed digital literacy as far as possible. I think my final point, though, would be that we need to acknowledge that there's a huge difference between what we have done over the last 3 months, which is an emergency response to digitalising our delivery, to digitalising the way that we communicate with our students. But then moving forward, blended learning is a wholly different thing. And I hope that one of the messages that came across in my paper was the need now to review our curriculum such that we are embedding digital skills onto the curriculum, that we are creating digitally literate graduates through our own teaching, deliveries and design. Because simply to bring a curriculum designed for physical delivery online is not going to make for a very good product. So we almost have to pull the words off our program specification and our module descriptors, throw them in the air and see where they land, and see if that works online, because otherwise we need to start creating afresh.
Thanks, Emma. Well, you know, we're all about exactly your message about collaboration, community, sharing, working it out together. That's what we're all about. I mean, it's our philosophy here. That's why we organised this conference. In fact, I've invited Emily Albon to give a seminar, but she hasn't replied. So if you see her,
I'll remind her. Yeah, I mean, I think it is so important that we do acknowledge one another's work, because, you know, there are going to be challenges from every aspect in moving online. And I almost look at it like a three-tiered process of, we need the institution to get behind us in providing the infrastructure to make these things possible. We need our staff at departmental or faculty level to share ideas and to support one another and be compassionate in the way that we may realise that a couple of colleagues are not going to be on board with this straight away. And then you've got that third level of students, and they should be at the core of what we are designing and producing for them. And almost around all that, if I should pen the bubble analogy, that's our wider community, and we're all in it together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I don't know if anybody's got any questions or comments. Oh, there's a chat thing. Wait a moment.
Yeah.
I think that Dorothy says she'll definitely fail the exam. Not sure which exam, Dorothy. Oh, that's, yeah, Ari's exam. I thought that's right. That's so difficult.
Do what?
That exam where you have to ask the question. I thought that was really tough.
Not really, if you consider the fact that they have been practicing these cases, I mean, my cases or other cases for over a whole course. It's not so hard to come up with the story themselves, I think. I don't know. They did it. The fact is they did it. I actually wanted to say something about teaching, online teaching, if we have just 2 minutes. And I think that, I mean, we did it quite well. We transferred to the Zoom, but you can't really expect to talk for an hour and a half to your students through a screen and expect them to be able to follow you. It's next to impossible. And the trick is engagement. You need to get them engaged. You need to do that in the class as well, but much more so when you teach through Zoom. And here technology comes in. There's so many different things that you can use through technology, and to get them engaged and to have them cooperate. I had them, for instance, in a course I gave on international trade law. I had groups of students negotiate international sales agreements. Every time a different part of the agreement. I use Kahoot, which is very nice. Students love Kahoot. I use it in class. I use it also now when I teach in Zoom. There's something called Padlet. There's something called Padlet, which is an interesting tool that you can use. And there's a lot of other technological stuff out there that can be used to make things more interesting and to break up that horrible hour and a half that you need to speak to a mic with all of their cameras closed. You have no idea if they're listening, if they're there. Maybe they just connected to and then went out to play football. I don't know. It's really not easy.
Well, we've overrun and oh, sorry, Sabine.
Sorry, I just very quickly wanted to pick up on what Emma was saying and what Ari was saying. And I think Emma's idea of kind of being a community and thinking about collaboration and helping each other kind of extends out into really looking at what resources are out there as well. Like Ari says, there's Kahoot and there's all of these other platforms. There's, you know, providers like ourselves that can take some of the work out of the university's hands, and just thinking of new models of collaboration even within universities in how teaching is delivered, how it's credentialed, how it's accredited and all that. But I think the more conferences like this where you can have these dialogues and think about, well, what are other people doing? And, oh, you know, Ari uses Kahoots. My kids have been doing nothing but Kahoots for the last 3 months. They're absolute whizzes. You know, and I think there's so much we can learn from each other and collaborate that hopefully that's going to be one of the outcomes of all of this, is a more collaborative approach, which at the end of the day will only benefit the students, really.
Well, absolutely. That's a good way to end, because that's absolutely the message. We have got to end because we've got to let our colleagues go home. But thank you, Sabine, Ari, and Emma. Thanks so much for sharing and staying behind.